Today we're talking to Mr. Hans Hoogervorst, the chairman of the Netherlands Authority for Financial Markets. He also serves as the vice chairman of the IOSCO Technical Committee, and he's the chairman of the International Accounting Standards Committee Foundation. Thank you very much for speaking to us today. In terms of the range of areas that you're involved in today, which of the committees that you serve in would you say is the most substantive and the most important in helping us think through what the financial architecture should look like, going forward after the crisis?
I suppose that my main role is that of being chairman of the Dutch Financial Markets Authority, one of the very many European supervisors in Europe. What I believe that is one of the big questions for Europe is how to restructure its supervisory regime. Everybody rightly criticizes the situation in the United States that supervision is very much fragmented. But the truth is that in Europe it is not much better. We have 27 banking regulators, we have 27 insurance regulators, and we have 27 securities regulators in Europe. So also that is highly fragmented. There is now talk of centralizing supervision in Europe to some extent. I think that is highly necessary, since I believe that one reason why we got into the mess that we are currently in and will remain so for the next couple of years is that there was a lot of regulatory arbitrage going on in the world between financial markets, which led to a race to the bottom in the quality of supervision. So I believe it is very important that we have more centralization of supervision, both in Europe and the United States, and more coordination between the two.
As chairman of the Netherlands Authority for Financial Markets, the Netherlands is an interesting country where your largest financial institutions are what you would call in the American system an integrated financial institution model in that way. How close do you come as a markets regulator to dealing with banks?
Well, in the Netherlands we have the Twin Peaks model of supervision, which means that you have on the one hand a prudential supervisor, which is our central bank, the Dutch central bank, who supervises the prudential situation of both banks and insurance companies. My institution, the AFM, is a conduct of business regulator across the board.
Oh, okay.
So we do not only regulate the securities market, we also supervise the quality of mortgage lending, for example, by banks and insurance companies. And I think if this crisis has demonstrated one thing, is how important it is to have proper conduct of business regulation.
The interesting lesson from the UK and the US experience in the different regulatory models that we have in place is the importance of conversations between the conduct of business regulator and the prudential regulator. How would you describe the working relationships between the different regulators in the Netherlands?
It is going very well. We have a very clear distinction of responsibilities. That is very important, that you don't overlap and have turf competition between the two of you. And for that reason, we have no conflicts about who is doing what. And we have very regular meetings with each other to tell each other about our concerns.
Right. Would a situation like Northern Rock happen in the Netherlands? Are there areas where the ball can drop between the different?
Well, let me put it this way: from this crisis, there is no clear victor in terms of supervisory models, because we are all affected.
Yes.
The Netherlands and the UK and the United States. So there is no clear superior model.
I understand the humility on that point, but what would you say are the common themes that you struggle with, that the Bank of England struggles with the Federal Reserve Bank struggles with?
Well, what I think is extremely important is that the regulator that is responsible for systemic risk, which in most countries is the central bank, that regulator is also responsible for micro-prudential regulation, supervision of the prudential situation of banks and insurance companies. Obviously, because you get a lot of signals from your micro-prudential supervision for the systemic situation of your economy and vice versa. So I think that one problem that, for example, the UK had was that those two functions were divorced from each other. You can do that, but then you need very good cooperation and coordination. Personally, I believe it's better to have them in one hand.
Right, and the conduct of business regulator also looks after the consumer front.
Yes, that's one of our main tasks. We have in the Netherlands, for example, we have just issued a very critical report of the quality of consumer lending and mortgage lending in our country. We have decided or found that a quarter of such lending is below the standards that we would like to see. So we do a lot to improve.
Tell me this, that in terms of the model that you have, one of the challenges facing regulators with an integrated model is really skill sets within the organization and the bias of the organization one way or another. How do you deal with that?
Well, that is why it is, we believe Twin Peaks model is a very good model. You can imagine that if you're an integrated supervisor, you are responsible for the financial health of a bank, for example. You're in a crisis situation, the bank is doing very poorly. At the same time, you see that this bank is giving very poor mortgages to consumers.
Right.
Your instinct will be to close an eye to those practices.
Which they do in many countries.
Which they do in many countries, so as not to bring this bank into further trouble.
They always err on the side of the institution.
Yeah, so it is there is an inherent conflict between these two issues that you deal with. So that's why we believe it is important to put the conduct of business regulation in a separate entity. Of course, that entity should not close its eye for the general situation of an economy and for the potential situation of banks. And that's why it's also important to talk to each other closely. But as a matter of fact, when 2 years ago I began with this in my position as chairman of the Dutch AFM, I was rather indifferent to which model would be the best, but I have become convinced also as a result of this crisis that this is indeed a better model.
Were there incidences in the Netherlands, like there were in a number of countries, of mis-selling of complex instruments?
Oh, absolutely.
And how did your agency deal with that?
Yeah, there has been a lot of problems with unit-linked products in the Netherlands, and we have been very strict.
You have the right to fine the institutions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And did you?
And we do that. And we also have issued fines for mis-selling in terms of mortgage lending. And we believe that is very important to do. These are very complicated products. Even a mortgage is a very complicated product for most people. You only buy 1 or 2 or 3 houses in your life. You don't develop experience as a consumer. So it's very important that there is a watchful eye of a supervisor to look at the quality.
Right.